Sudan, located in the northern part of Africa, has had its shares of crises since it got independence from Britain in 1956. The country had witnessed two prolonged civil wars. The first lasted from 1955 to 1972, while the second began in 1983. Although both wars have been fought largely in the southern part of the country, their aims were diverged. The first aimed at independence and autonomy of the South, whereas the second primarily aimed at restructuring the central political institutions and devolving power on marginalized areas. All the Sudanese who witnessed these wars that spanned for decades are yet to forget the trauma and harrowing experiences they had during the period. And right now, another clashes have broken out. A legal practitioner, Mr. Moses Obaditon, traced the genesis of the prolonged crisis in Sudan.
For over 50 years, the Sudanese were fighting what we call internal or civil war among themselves in order to demarcate between the southern and the northern Sudan. And eventually, I think about 10 years ago, they succeeded in creating that demarcation. And so we have two countries out of one country. However, the current one is another internal within two warlords who successfully, topple a military government and install themselves. So to us, it is a game of ego. It is one of the problems of African power tussle. So their main goal is not the people. It's just about self. And for us to be able to understand it better is to look at how Africa internal crisis has always cost lives, property, and underdevelopment. And if you look around within that geographical area, when you compare a country like Egypt, and you compare it to Sudan, you see Sudan is far behind in terms of development in almost all perspectives.
The renewed clashes erupted in the middle of April this year amid an apparent power struggle between the two main factions of the military regime, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, who is considered to be the de facto ruler and has the loyalty of the Sudanese armed forces, and the paramilitaries of the Rapid Support Forces, a collection of militia that followed the former warlord General Mohamed Dagolo. The power struggle was said to have had its roots in the years before a 2019 uprising that ousted former ruler Omar al-Bashir, who built up formidable security forces, which he was alleged to have deliberately set against one another. Otumba Jumoke Ogunkayede and citizen Lolawe said the Ego War, which has led to loss of lives and wanton destruction of property, should be stopped in the interest of the people.
If you're looking for a job as a manager, one, they want to know if you're married. Two, they want to know if you have children. So, which means you have been able to deal with a crowd, even within your home setting. There will always be people like that in every society. In biblical time, you have Thomas, Didymus, and so on and so forth. People who, and Judas Iscariot, people who face a problem so that they can, that's how their lives are made. There will be some people there who may not necessarily want peace. There are others that's their creation, and they're not doing it because they hate anybody. It's their creation to put a peaceful society at war.
I think the only way to silence the guns is to stop production of destructive weapons. That's the only way to silence guns in the world, and to encourage people dialoguing, talking. There's nothing that cannot be resolved with dialogue. After World War, we still go to dialogue. So I think the crisis in Sudan is as a result of failure to place emphasis on dialoguing to resolve issues rather than going to war. And I want to use this opportunity to appeal to Nigerians to also follow peace.
Reports say the renewed violence in Khartoum, the Sudanese capital, have claimed so many lives, while thousands of people have been displaced internally, while the country risks regional spillover of refugees. This has led to a drastic setback to development of the country and caused severe humanitarian crisis. Several of Sudan's neighbors, including Ethiopia, Chad, and South Sudan, have been affected by the political upheavals in the country. Similarly, many countries have had to evacuate their citizens from the crisis-torn areas, Nigeria inclusive. Otumba Ogunkayede stated that the time has come for African Union AU and the United Nations UN to rise to the occasion.
Basically, in Sudan, you have two people, a general and another general. One became president, the other is the vice president. I think there will be personality issues, personality clashes. And who is this man? I joined the army in 1960. He was still a secondary school student. Now they made him to come ahead of me. Now I will show him what I know. So it's still possible to contain the crisis as is now. But unless it's done within a specified time, it can lead to a war where you now find Mauritania supporting somebody and find Gabon supporting the other. So now it can still be it's resolvable now if the African people, the elder statesmen in Africa will come together who had been in power before and bring both of them together.
Why citizens Lola Way stress the need for Nigerian leaders to make the country conducive for the citizens to reduce the large number of people jetting out of the country in search of greener pastures on a daily basis.
We should make our country safe so that Nigerians can remain in Nigeria. It is because of the level of insecurity, unemployment, and all the bad things that are happening in Nigeria that has forced Nigerians to go outside the shores of Nigeria. That is, we must address that issue first of all, and then talk about response. The response time has never been. I also want to appeal to countries like Ethiopia that I'm not sure, that has been discriminating against Nigerians. And somebody said that discriminating attitude is as a result of their fear of Nigerians staying put in Ethiopia instead of using Ethiopia as a transit route, that Nigerians may decide to stay put in Ethiopia instead of transiting out of Sudan through Ethiopia.
In his submission, another analyst, Mr. Shola Ishola, maintained that one of the ways of putting a permanent stop to the violence which erupted between military factions after the faltering transition to civilian-led government is to ensure that power is not returned to the military.
First thing is that I think I recommend is for African Union to step in to Sudan and retire the two generals that are fighting. I don't see any of them backing down to each other. They've been in the army for long. They are generals. So the best thing is to get them off the army, because I don't think either of them will be willing to submit to one another. And I think also because what actually happened is that Sudan was trying to transition from military into civilian rule. And I think if Sudan transitioned into civilian rule, the challenge of generals fighting each other would reduce. So I would recommend also that transitioning into the civilian rule in Sudan is completed. At the end of that, I think that the challenge in Sudan will go to an end.
The respondents noted that it is high time African leaders started thinking about how to move the continent and individual countries forward. A feat they maintain can never be achieved in an atmosphere full of chaos. Oluchi Amuda, OSBC News.